Hi, this is Tom Soane and welcome to another episode of The Anonymous Landlord. Today, I've got a really important subject to discuss with landlords. Any landlord, even if you are managed by a letting agent and a letting agent finds all of your tenants for you, or even if you're a self-managing landlord, a DIY landlord, and you do it all yourself. You find your own tenants, you do your own viewings, you do your own referencing, or maybe you use a referencing agency to do the referencing for you. This is for you, and this is vital. If you want to find the best tenants out there, then you have to get it right from the very beginning. Or you have to make sure that your letting agent is getting it right from the very beginning. So, I wanted to give you some expertise straight from me. Now, bearing in mind I've been doing this for years, I've learnt very closely from Rightmove and Zoopla and On the Market and Gumtree and all of those places on how you should advertise your property and what you should contain in the advert for your property to make sure you get the right tenants and you're not going to waste your time with tenants that won't proceed or are unable to proceed. And that's the key here. Remember that the overall goal is to eventually make you anonymous. And that's whether you manage everything yourself or you use a letting agent. We want to make you anonymous. So, right from the very start, we've got to get it right so that you can get the best tenants that aren't going to waste your time. So I've tried to map this out into a bit of a journey. So you can just follow it and just listen to this podcast again if you need to write it down. If you're in your car right now, then just make sure you can go back to write this stuff down because there's quite a few bits of information in here and quite a few things that you need to do. So let's crack on. Now, first of all, where can you advertise? If you're a landlord that does everything yourself, if you advertise your own property, you go and find your own tenants, you do all your own viewings and all of that stuff, basically you do it all yourself, then where can you advertise and where should you advertise? Now look, the best place to advertise, in my opinion, is Rightmove. Now, that's for a number of reasons. First of all, most people search for properties on Rightmove. That's uncontestable. Second of all, over the years, I found that the more respectable tenants will search for properties on Rightmove. And they will look on Rightmove first before they look in other portals or platforms or websites. Now, that's not saying that no good tenants look anywhere other than Rightmove, but I'm talking generally in the grander scheme of things, most good tenants search on Rightmove. Now, yes, there are also some bad tenants that search on Rightmove, but you have to play the numbers game, don't you? If there are 100 tenants searching for properties and 10% of them are bad, 90% of them are good, which is generally speaking what it is, then you have to play the numbers game. So if more people are searching on Rightmove, you've got more good tenants searching than bad tenants. And I think the ratio shifts between good tenants and bad tenants that search on Rightmove. So Rightmove is the best place to advertise your property. But you, as a standard private landlord, cannot advertise on Rightmove, on Zoopla, or on the market. Unless you use companies like Open Rent or similar companies like that you pay them to be on those portals for a period of time. Do I like those websites? Yes and no. I like them, yes, because they're cheap. Now, I shouldn't be saying all of this because I own a letting agent, which is Pink Street, but my podcast goes out nationally and I get people from all over the country listening to me and watching me. So it makes sense to give you honest advice rather than biased advice towards my letting agent. But I will come back to this point because there are reasons why you might want to use a letting agent or even think about it. Or there's also a reason that you could use a letting agent to your advantage. So we'll get to that in a minute. But the best places to advertise your property are Rightmove, Zoopla, On the Market. Now, actually, in certain areas of the country, Rightmove is better than Zoopla and On the Market. In other areas, Zoopla is better than Rightmove and On the Market. In other areas, On the Market is better than the other two. Now, I couldn't tell you what areas are better than the others, and I doubt if the portals would tell you either, because they don't want to lose market share. Their businesses, I understand. However, if you use a company like Open Rent, then you can spread. And by the way, I'm not being sponsored by Open Rent. I'm not being paid by them or anything like that. I'm just giving you honest advice. Again, this is detrimental to my letting agent, but I just want to make sure that you landlords have the right information, the right resources, and you can get the best tenants. Now, downsides to all of that is you really don't get any advice. You really have to do it yourself and learn for yourself and figure it out for yourself. So use the next load of information I'm going to give you to make sure you get it right. Another really good way to advertise your property to let is through letting agents. Now wait, I don't mean let a letting agent do all of it. Although that's probably the best way to find the best tenants. If you want to do it yourself and you don't want to use a letting agent, then you might as well get it right. So you could approach letting agents and ask them to provide you with an advertise only service. Now, my letting agent, Pink Street, yes, of course, they do an advertise only service, which is where the landlord takes all the photos, writes all the descriptions, and simply uses the letting agent for their subscription or membership to Rightmove, Zoopla on the market. Now, a lot of letting agents will not want to do this because they'll feel cheapened or they'll feel like they're missing out on you being one of their full-time clients. But I think those letting agents are missing a trick. This is a different world we live in. And actually, half the landlords in the country don't use letting agents. The other half do. Of the other half of them use agents for lettings only. Now, those stats are not factually correct. I'm generally guessing at that figure based on the information and people I've spoken to over the years. So, if you approach a letting agent and say, will you provide me an advertise only package? I'll provide you photos, descriptions and details. I'll do all the viewings. I'll select the tenants. I'll negotiate with the tenants and I will sort out the referencing. I'll sort out the contracting. I'll sort out all of the pre-tenancy legislative requirements and compliance. If you tell that agent, I'll do all of that, all I need you to do is upload the property listing to Rightmove, Zoopla on the market. You'll probably find a lot of letting agents will accept that. You'll pay, don't get me wrong, you'll pay for that service, but you'll pay to be on those websites regardless. So you might as well pay a letting agent to do that little bit of work for you, right? Because a lot of letting agents as well, they invest quite a bit of money in a CRM, which is like a piece of software that will just upload that property to all of the portals. So my company certainly do. So we spend a lot of money on that because it saves us hours in actually uploading the properties to the various places. So Rightmove, Zoopla on the market, you can go through agents or you can go through Open Rent, which I guess is like an advertise only agent anyway, isn't it? Now the benefit to having an agent is because is that by default they will give you advice. So that's why I say there are benefits to using letting agents for advertising only. Because you go for a company like Open Rent, they provide a service, but it's very much on your head. It's very much you're taking the responsibility. You have to make sure you get the listing right. Whereas a good letting agent will advise you on how to get the best response. The next place you can advertise that property is on Facebook groups. Now, if you're not on Facebook, surely you know somebody that is. I think half the bloody world are on Facebook. So all you need to do is search in the Facebook search facility, property for rent in insert city here. Now that will show you a load of groups and pages that are relevant to your search, right? So do that from a tenant's perspective. Think about it. If you search up in there property to rent in Portsmouth, which is my home city, then all of those groups and pages are going to come up that are relevant to that search. So go onto those pages, go onto those groups and advertise your property. Now, in a minute, I'm just about to tell you the perfect listing, because believe me, your actual listing is the difference between you getting a tenant that's going to not bother paying rent and smash your house up and cause havoc with your neighbours, and a tenant that isn't going to do those three awful things. So the listing is the perfect bit, and I'll come to that in a second. But you can advertise in those Facebook groups and on those Facebook pages. Most of those groups and pages will welcome that advertisement because it's good for them. It's good to grow their group. So near me, for an example, there's a group called Private Landlords Portsmouth. Now that is very much a tenant-heavy advertising group where a landlord puts their property in there and tenants are in there looking for properties. And they just match the two up. So it's good for the group because they get listings. They get access to, or they get to grow their presence in Facebook. Another place you can advertise is Gumtree, obviously. Now, historically, Gumtree was always a little bit iffy. And you do tend to generate quite a lot of pretty crappy tenants. And I'm sorry to say that, but the ratio is much higher of bad tenant to good tenant when you're going through places like Gumtree, because there's no checks, and it's because agents can't really advertise on there freely. You tend to get a lot more private landlords advertising, and when you get a lot more private landlords advertising, you tend to attract tenants that perhaps want to avoid so many checks and avoid so much due diligence, which I'll tell you about due diligence actually in a minute. I'll get there. I'm just working through my list. But look, you can advertise on Gumtree, and actually you can do sponsored posts on Gumtree to keep your listing at the top. So certainly worth looking into. I won't go into costs and all of that right now, but you get the idea. Check out Gumtree. Nice and easy one to do. I will tell you about what to include in your listing as well in a second. Let me get there. I'll get there. So the next place you can advertise in a weird way is the council, your local council. You can advertise to your local council and say, I've got this property to rent. Now they're going to come back to you with a few different answers. One might be not interested. Fair enough. Don't ask, don't get. Number two will be, well, we're trying to house this family or this tenant or these people. Will you accept them? Here are their credentials. Now, here's a little secret, and don't tell anyone I've told you, but you can sometimes charge the council a little bit more rent if they're desperate to house someone. I don't know why I'm whispering. This is going to go out to millions and millions of people, but remember that. So you can actually up the rent sometimes. Now, don't be greedy. Remember your yield. Remember your true yield as well. Don't be greedy. Just make sure you're going to get the right return for you. But yeah, speak to the council. The other thing the council might do is offer you some form of guaranteed service, which effectively means that the council becomes your tenant and they use your property to house their tenants. And they will then maintain the property, they will refurbish it, they'll repair it, and you don't have any responsibility or financial liability for it. Now, warning. The council will charge heavily for that. In some instances, they'll charge up to 50% of your rent. So you can haggle this and you can try and get the better deal for you, but I don't really like those deals, but it's up to you. Now, couple of warnings is in a minute I'm going to talk to you about avoiding the bad tenants, and you must do your due diligence. Please do not just go for a tenant who says yes. I promise you it will not end well if you keep doing that. Now, historically, years and years and years ago, if a bad tenant moves into the property and they don't pay the rent, you could just go and change the locks and kick them out. But you just can't do that anymore. It is criminal now, and you will get fined, you'll get prosecuted. It will be big trouble for you if you don't follow the correct procedures of evicting tenants. And the big part about it is that if you don't follow the procedure to evict a tenant properly, and you don't get it right here, and you don't get it right from the beginning, then you won't be able to evict the tenant. So we'll get this bit right, we'll get it right from the very beginning, and then you'll have no problems if you need to evict a tenant. Remember, it's all risk, isn't it? All this work you do now contributes to reducing your risk in that property. If you reduce your risk, you have a better investment. Now, so moving on to the actual listing itself, and just to recap on that, you can advertise on Rightmove, Zoopla, find on the market, find a property, prime location, all of those places, either through a letting agent that will do an advertise only service or through other portals like Open Rent, so on and so on. However, I do think Open Rent are going to struggle in the future because I don't think Rightmove will allow them to compete with the other agents. Think about it, Rightmove have 20,000 clients, and if they all get annoyed because Rightmove are letting Open Rent just advertise there and they're not agents, then, I mean, I'm a little bit pissed off about it personally, but what can I do? It's just business. So anyway, look, you can use the Facebook groups, Facebook pages, Gumtree, speak to your council, but make sure you do your due diligence to avoid bad tenants. So the listing itself, look, how can you make the perfect listing which is definitely going to attract the best tenants? This is easy for me, but there are some, they're not secrets, but there are some techniques that maybe you wouldn't know unless you're in the industry and you've been doing it for a number of years. First of all, look, obviously, take high-res photos. Now, the current iPhones and Samsungs and other makes are phenomenal. The latest ones at taking photos. But you want to have the best photo you can possibly have. Now, I don't mean go out and buy an expensive camera. In fact, don't go and buy an expensive camera. You just need a good quality photo. Because remember, most people, something like 60% or 70%, most, I don't know the actual stat. Rightmove did tell me the stat actually, but they're expecting, by the way, they're expecting 90% of all property views to be on the phone in the very near future. So remember that your photos need to be phone friendly. So you can take them on your phone and they will be great for other people to view on their phone. And I want to give you a quick little photography lesson 101. If there are any photographers out there, then please, I'd love your input on this. But if you go out and buy a really expensive 14 megapixel camera and it's brilliant and it's got the great lenses and all of that, then that photo, all right, I might be wrong about this, but that photo is being taken this big. But it's being viewed on something this big. So you don't need it. All you need is something this big that's going to take a photo of something this big and share it on something where people are going to look at those photos on something this big. Now, if you're on the podcast, sorry about that. What I basically did was say, if you get an expensive camera and it's a big 14 megapixel thing, then it's taking huge photos that you're then compressing so that people can view it on their phone. Really, I've heard that the internet or Facebook or places like that naturally compress photos down to about 5 megapixels. Now, if that's the case, now I don't know if that's true or not, but if that's the case, then you're just wasting a load of megapixels for no reason. So you might as well just take it on something like your phone or a standard camera so that you can get the best photo which can appear in the best way on phones. Now, when you're taking that photo, make sure you're doing it in a landscape. If your phone is upright, then that is portrait. If your phone is sideways, that's landscape. Sounds really obvious. Sorry if you already knew that. Next, hold that phone or that camera at your chest height to take the photo. It really irritates me when people hold the phone up high and take photos. Hold it at your chest height and take the photo from that height. And also try to photograph as much of the room as possible. Go and stand in a corner and take the photo of as much of it as you can. Try and get as much floor and wall space into that photo as you possibly can. And always try and include the window. If you can get that window into the photo, then that's a better photo. If you can, only take photos of the best parts of the house or the flat. You should not take, well, do you know what? Rightmove recommend that you should only have between 8 and 12 photos because they statistically are the most effective listings where there are between 8 and 12 photos. And let's think about that a bit more, because what is the property listing? It's an advertisement. It's a trailer. You don't go and watch a movie trailer only to see the whole movie in the trailer. You're then not going to go and see the movie. And it's the same with a property. If you are looking for properties to move into and you've got someone that puts 30 photos or 20 photos on there, then you might feel before you've seen the property that you've already seen the entire property. And you might make your mind up that you don't want to go and see the property. Now, it's like selling a car, isn't it? The car salesman will always try and get you into the car. And that's what we want to do here. That's the whole point of a listing. You're not going to rent a property out through the listing. You're not going to sell a property through the listing. Your job is creating an advert which brings people to the property. That's the job. Remember that. Don't think of anything else. So only use 8 to 12 photos, preferably 8, and only use the features of the property, the real selling points. Don't take a photo of a room that's full of junk. Don't take a photo of a plain magnolia box room. You just don't need it. Don't take a photo of a door. Don't take a photo of a ceiling. Don't take a photo of the corner of a room. Who's seen any listings from agents where they've taken a photo of the corner of a room? Thanks for that. Brilliant. But definitely include the window. Windows are always good to include as long as you get the rest of the room in too. Now you need to include the most basic of information in the description. Again, don't be emotional. Only include factual information. So what does that room contain? And again, go back to that whole point of it's a trailer. It's not the full property. So in that listing, you give the key features of that room, purely factual and no emotion. And by no emotion, I mean don't write things like, this wonderful and beautiful place is full of natural sunlight and blah, 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 blah. Don't include selling types of wording. Don't try and sell in your listing. Just give the features, give them factually, make sure they're correct, use the photos and the listing to draw people into the property. Don't try and sell to people on the listing. Why? Easy. Look, nobody likes to be sold to. And in fact, when you're looking through properties, what you're looking for is the facts. If you feel like someone's trying to sell to you, there is an element of doubt that creeps in. There's an element of, some people become a little bit more stubborn and rebellious. Other people start to question why that person needs to sell. Why are you describing it so fantastically and wonderfully? Why not just tell me what it is? There are just different people around the world and different people react differently to different things, but everybody reacts the same to fact. You read a fact, it's logical and that's it. Whereas if you are trying to use emotion and you're trying to oversell something, then the reaction of people is unpredictable. And also, don't bother anyway, because it just doesn't get you anywhere. And in fact, the best listings are the one that state the facts of the features and draw people into the property. Now, going on a little bit further, do include a floor plan. Now, you might think, I don't know how to draw a floor plan. That's all right, because there's loads of companies that will do it for you. If you go to MetroPix, for an example, just Google search MetroPix, that's METROPIX, then you can either draw it on their website or you can just send them a rough sketch and they'll do it for you and it's only a few quid. But why get a floor plan? Well, I'll come on to this a bit more later, but what you don't want is tenants coming to your property to view that shouldn't be there, or that are time wasters, or that aren't able to proceed. And actually, floor plans are a good way of separating time wasters from actual proceedable tenants, because they will have already seen the layout of the property. And also enhance your photos. Again, for a few quid, you can go to places or websites like Property Box or Photo Doctor, and you send them your images, and photography experts will lighten up the dark spots. They'll make sure everything can be seen in the photo, and they'll make the photos look awesome. They really do. Even external shots, everything looks better in the sunshine, right? And even external shots, if it's a cloudy, miserable day, they'll just lift out the detail of the house or the or the flat, and they'll add a blue sky, and it just looks so much nicer, and it's more appealing to people, and more people will come round. Definitely do not advertise that you don't accept DSS or housing benefit or anything like that. Just don't put it anywhere in your listing. And when people contact you about your listing, do not say that you don't accept housing benefit or DSS. It's now classed as discrimination. I did a whole video on how you can get around this and how to combat this, but please do not do it. It is now illegal. Okay, so that's the listing itself. Now, you need to dress the property. Now, I don't mean dress it in a nice frock. I mean dress the property, prepare it, get it ready for the photos, get it ready for viewings. And there's some real key things that you must remember here. I'm not talking about just tidying things up or the buzzword for this sort of stuff, declutter. Of course, that's so bloody obvious. Do you know what? There are some people that I watch a lot of video, I read a lot of blogs, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and read a lot of articles from so-called property experts, and the first thing they say, oh, you've got to declutter. Yeah, okay, that's obvious, isn't it? Yeah, you've got to tidy, you've got to clean. Well, yeah, that makes sense. But dressing your property and arranging your property, preparing your property, it's more scientific than that. There's more to it than just tidying. Come on. Anyway, rant over. So first of all, you've got to arrange the furniture in a certain way that displays more floor and wall space, right? So by that, I mean if you have a lounge with a sofa and 2 armchairs and a coffee table and a bookshelf and a TV unit and a magazine rack and another smaller coffee table and blah, 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 all of these things, then I would say take the coffee table out, take the bookshelf out, so that you can see more floor and wall space. Take the photo and put them back. Or put them in a cupboard, store them, so that when you do viewings, there you go. Now, if you've got an unfurnished property, I would actually recommend renting furniture. It's cheap as chips, and it really does benefit your listing. It makes people attracted to the property. But that's a whole different thing of what you should include in your property and what you shouldn't. So rent furniture if you want, or just leave it empty. But the key is that you've got to show floor and wall space. That's the thing. Good. And why do you do that? Well, the science behind that is that people looking at that property will be able to visualize their own stuff in your property. If you've got a property full up of stuff, then some people find it harder to visualize where they're going to put their own sofa, their own TV, their own bed, their own kettle, their own things like that. So you need to try and arrange the furniture and arrange the contents of your room in a way that enables people to visualize their own stuff. If you've got sofas and things like that, make sure, look, this is an obvious one, but make sure the cushions are all flattened out and not creased up. Like, you know, when I sit on my sofa, I tend to just curl up all the sofas because I'm a big bloke and I just flop out on the sofa and put my arm over one cushion and then it becomes all creased and crushed. So make sure that they are lifted out and flattened. So that there's no, it just doesn't look hideous. You know what I mean. That's an obvious one. Now in the kitchen, by the way, you don't need to have tons and tons and tons of utensils on the work surfaces. People want more work surface. They want more space to cook and to prepare. So The more stuff you can remove from the work surfaces for the photo, chuck them in a cupboard and get them out of the way, take the photo. I would leave them in there for the time being, but just make sure you've got as much surface space in the kitchen on display as you can. In the bedroom, if you've got a bed up there, pull the covers flat. Do you know what? If you YouTube a video about making the perfect bed, it's so easy to just get that all looking flat and perfect. Do you know what? Photos of bedrooms, and go through Rightmove and find some for yourself, but photos of bedrooms look terrible when the bed looks all ruffled up and unflat. Also, open the curtains. Oh my goodness me, open the curtains. It drives me crazy when I see estate agents and letting agents taking photos of rooms where they've left the curtains closed. Just makes rooms look so dull. So open the curtains, and remember, if you haven't got a nice view out of that window, a lot of the time you can't actually see much of the view in the photos. So that means you can take the photo with the window in it, and a lot of the times if it's a little bit bright, then you won't be able to see the crappy view. But definitely open the curtains, please. And you know what? Take net curtains down unless they're really nice and bright white in colour and really neat looking. Net curtains that are not nice, white and clean and neat just look hideous. Get rid of them, please. Now, so by this time, we've got the perfect listing, right? Would you agree? We've done all of those things that I've just been through. We've only got 8 to 12 photos on there. They're all in the right shape, the right resolution. We've got a floor plan there. We've arranged everything. We've dressed the property ready for the photos. And we've taken awesome photos, and we've got the great description. They've all been listed. Now we need to pre-vet. Now, pre-vetting is arguably just as important to the vetting itself. But this is pre-vetting. This is, well, in my office, in my letting agent, we call it pre-app. It's a pre-application. Now, if you advertise your property for rent, then the chances are you're going to get a ton of people inquiring about your property. And all of them are going to ring you or email you or text you and say, can I come and view? Now, if you spend let's just say for the sake of conversation, you get 20 people that want to come and view your property. That means you've got to do 20 viewings, and that's going to take a ton of your time when you don't need to. Because there are going to be a lot of those tenants that are going to waste your time. On the phone, they'll be really enthusiastic and they desperately want to come and see that property. But you now need to do a pre-app, a pre-application, a pre-vet. First of all, you need to state to every single tenant that contacts you about that property, you need to state to them the income that is required for this household is X. Now, look, if you give me and my lettings team a ring or send us an email, tom@pinkstreet.co.uk, and I'll help you work out what the income required should be for the rent that you are charging. There is actually a calculation to get that bit right. It's vitally important, because if you have people that come along that earn 12 grand a year, that's not their fault. But if they can't afford your rent on paper, then the statistics say that you are at a much higher risk of them not being able to afford the rent in the future, and you'll have problems. Especially now, there are so many more tenant protection services and so much more legislation for landlords to follow where tenants can't pay rent or don't treat the property right. You need to get this bit right. Please do a pre-vet. You need to state, thank you for your inquiry. The income required for this property is £30,000 a year for the household. Do you qualify for that? Yes or no? If it's a no, you cannot come and see this property. If it's a yes, you move on to the next question. Now, in some instances, you might be able to get a guarantor. So if they're close, maybe they're a little bit below the minimum income, then you say, do you have a guarantor? You will need a guarantor to be able to move into this property. Yes or no? Yes, great, perfect. This property needs to be tenanted by this date. Are you able to move into the property before this date or on this date? Yes or no? If the answer is no, If they say to you, look, I can't move in for a month, but it's empty for a month, then you can say, well, no, sorry, that doesn't work for me. I've got another 20 people that are coming to view, so this property, that's just going to cost you a month's rent, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord. Don't agree to it. Next, you need to state the employment status. Are you full-time employed? Have you been employed for longer than this amount of time? Whatever the criteria is that you're asking for, that person needs to qualify for their employment status, their income, their situation, when they can move into the property. Have you had any county court judgments? Are you bankrupt? Are you in an IVA, which is an involuntary arrangement on their debt? Do you have a debt management plan? All of those questions. What's your credit rating like? I ask tenants to print off a copy of their credit report that they can get from Experian or Equifax. It's not very expensive, it's a few quid. Now, if they print that credit report off, then you can have a look at it. But that's a different thing. You can just ask that tenant, do you have any county court judgments or defaults? Are you bankrupt or you're in an IVA? Have you had any problems with debt in the past? Have you been refused renting a property in the past? Have you always paid your rent on time? What you're doing is you're pre-vetting their circumstances and their suitability for your property. And lastly, if you're a landlord that doesn't accept pets because of maybe your property type or something like that, ask them here, do you have pets? There's nothing worse than getting a way down the line with a tenant application and then they say, I've got a dog. Waste everybody's time, costs you money and time and energy. And what's the point in making any money from property if you've got no time or energy to enjoy it? And I'll ask you this question. By the way, if you're going to do 20 viewings, what is your hourly rate? Now, if you are, I don't know, let's just say you're £20 an hour and you're going to do 20 viewings, right? 400 quid. Is that right? 400 quid is what you are costing yourself to do those viewings. Now, if you're going to charge just 400 quid for your time, then there's your energy. So now what do you cost for that? I'd say you can get a very good letting agent for a very similar cost to do that whole process for you, and you will get better tenants. But hey, we're talking to DIY landlords here, people that feel like they can do it themselves and it's better to do it themselves. That's up to you. Of course it is. You know, some people just don't like using letting agents. Some people just want to do it all themselves and some people just want to own the process yourself. Now, I don't like that, but then I'm a bit biased. I'm the anonymous landlord and you know what? I make the same money from property, but I have all my time and all my energy. Anyway, that's a different thing. I'm not preaching, by the way. Everybody's different. You know, that's just the way I prefer to do it. You know what? Some people actually quite enjoy spending their time doing these things, and that's fine either way. So now, by this point, we have arranged. Let's just say, out of all of those 20 people that have contacted you, we've arranged 5 really good viewings with good tenants that you liked on the phone. They qualify for all of your criteria and they're ready to book an appointment. Now we've got to go into the viewing techniques and now we're getting into the science here. What we want to do is create a couple of things. First of all, we've got to create urgency. We have to make the tenant feel like they have to act quickly and they can't dilly-dally. And dilly-dally is a definite word, I promise. It's definitely in the dictionary. So how do we do that? And also, you've got to show the property. You have to encourage them to see the best parts of the property and to feel at home at that property. Because it's going to be their home. So you want them to feel that from the moment they walk in. Right, first of all, book your viewings in the same slot. We call it cluster viewings, meaning you cluster all of the appointments into one period of the day, of one day. And you say to each tenant, right, so we've got 5 people. Actually, let's go a bit further back, right? We've had 20 inquiries and we've done the pre-vet, done the pre-app, and we've qualified those 20 inquiries. 10 of them aren't able to proceed and 7 of them are, right? Now we say to those tenants, this is the viewing slot to view this property. And it is Saturday between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock. Are you able to make that time? Because that's the time we're doing it. If the tenant says no, Okay, well, that's the only time that I'm doing viewings. Thank you very much. I'll let you know after that time if the property has not been rented. I know, sounds crazy, but what you'll be left with, we're trying to save you time. Remember, I'm the anonymous landlord here, so I'm going all about efficiency, maximising your profits, minimising your time spent and your energy used. That's the key. But so if you now said to 5 tenants now, those are the tenants that are happy to come at the time that you've scheduled, and you're going to book them in for 15-minute slots back to back. Promise me you'll do that. Please do that. 15-minute slots back to back. So you are offering the times to the tenant, not vice versa. They are taking your time. You're not begging for their time. You are the one that has the property that they want to see, so they need to work around your schedule, and that is non-negotiable. These are the times that viewings are available for this property. If that tenant really wants to see the property and really likes it, they will work around you. If they're not that bothered and your property is just another property that they're viewing, then they won't come, and there's a much higher chance of them wasting 15 minutes of your time. Now, why do we do 15-minute slots? Well, first of all, I guess the evidence shows that that is the right amount of time for the tenant or the prospective tenant to view everything they need to see in the property. But also, it's the right amount of time for them to see and also feel a sense of whether I like it or not. Any longer than that, they start opening up questions that perhaps detract or distract from the property. Any less than that, they haven't seen enough. Now, if they do come in and they are in for less time than that, the chances are they're probably not going to take the property, just as a little tip. Anyway, 15-minute slots. The main reason, though, look, that is the ideal time for people to see a property, right? But the other reason is if you can create a one-in, one-out system, it naturally creates urgency. So as one tenant leaves, the next tenant comes in, they will feel like, oh, if I want this property, I better act quickly because that other tenant that's just left might take the property. Now, the tenant going in will know that other tenant can't take the property because I'm in with the landlord here. I'm the person doing the viewing right now, so nothing can happen in this next 15 minutes. But you have to, as a landlord, and promise me you'll keep this mentality, you have to do it on a first come, first served basis. So now you've got double urgency, and you've got one in, one out, and you're telling them all it's on a first come, first served basis. That puts pressure on tenants to act fast. Now, I know that sounds harsh, and if there are any tenants listening to this, I'm sorry that it is kind of harsh towards you, but it's not dishonest. Actually, what you're doing is just creating urgency because you're a landlord. These landlords, again, a lot of tenants don't realise, but an empty property is just costing money. So we have to create a little bit of urgency so that we can stop losing money and hemorrhaging money with an empty property. Empty properties are painful for landlords. So I'm really sorry, tenants. Well, I'm sorry but not sorry, to use a very modern term, because I'm sorry that tenants might feel that urgency and it might add a little bit of pressure. But I'm also not sorry because that is life. You go into any business, anywhere, even if you go into Tesco's to do your shopping, Tesco's are creating urgency with special offers. You go to any shop, there are special offers. Closing down sale ends Friday. I mean, these are all techniques for businesses to try and sell you their services or sell you their products. And it's honest urgency. And I'm sorry, tenants, if you feel offended by that, but that is it. That is what every person does and should do. So yes, now you've created a bit of urgency, one in, one out, first come, first serve. Now the viewing technique. I know, it's crazy, right? Believe it or not, the best letting agents and the best estate agents in the country have actually got lettings techniques. Now, for an example, if you're a property investor and you go round viewing properties, this is how you separate the good, trained, educated, capable estate agents and letting agents from the people that perhaps are just going to show you around, let you in, and not. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm judging a bit here, but look, the others that don't use proper techniques in viewings are not really very good at letting or selling, in my opinion. But I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. Because look, also the property does sell itself, the property does let itself to a certain point, as in, you go into a property, it doesn't really matter what the agent does. You're either going to buy it or rent it, and that's that. That's the argument. But my argument is, yes, I agree with that, but it's all about increasing your chances. It's not an extreme thing. If you do a good viewing technique, or if you've got a good viewing technique, it doesn't mean that 100% of your clients are going to buy or rent that property. But if you do a good viewing technique, then it means that maybe your chances increase by 10%. Everyone agree with that? I think you probably should, because I don't see that there's anything different to that. But that's what we're doing here. We're doing lots of little things. Going back to all the photos, high res, being phone friendly, holding the camera at chest height, getting certain aspects of the room in, the types of description you have, the floor plan. None of those single items on their own are going to 100% guarantee to sell or rent your property, but combined into the perfect listing, the perfect viewing, the perfect pre-app, the perfect pre-vet, combine all of those things, and you will be left with a higher chance of attracting a higher caliber of tenant and renting your property or selling your property faster. So remember that there are very definite viewing techniques. Now, the first viewing technique, and look, I'm not going to go into this in great detail because, look, there are other letting agents out there and estate agents out there, and I'm not going to give all of my training that I've ever gone through with my teams away, because that's what separates us and elevates us a little bit from the competition. Hey, don't get me wrong, other letting agents are fantastic at other things. Some agents are better than us at certain things. We're better at certain things than other agents. That's business. But on this thing, I have done a lot of mystery shopping and a lot of testing, and we are better than most at this. So here's a couple of those tips. Bearing in mind, you are doing 5 viewings, right? When that tenant walks into the property, let them walk around and lead the way, and tell them that at the beginning. So you say, and I quote, "I'll let you lead the way, walk into any room you want in whatever order you want. I'll follow you and I'll answer any questions and try and help you as much as I can." What does that do? Number one, it allows the tenant to feel like they're looking at this as their home. You're not in front of them distracting their vision or distracting them from other things. You are allowing them to take the lead and see the things that they want to see. And then, if you let them lead around, you just follow and you always stay out the way. If you go into a room with that tenant, do not stand in the doorway once they're coming back out. You have to create a feeling of space for them. So there's a way to do that. If you watch a boxing match, actually, prime example, watch a boxing match or MMA or anything like that, and watch the referee. The referee moves around in a way that gives the boxers the maximum amount of space in that ring or in that octagon. So follow that. You go into a room with people, you move around so that they have the most space. Next bit is to only speak when you're spoken to, but there is a little bit of a caveat to that. If you speak all the time, if you're a person that goes in trying to sell a property, then you're not allowing the tenant to see the things that they need to see. You're not allowing them to think about the things that are in your property, where they would put the sofa, where they would put the bed, what things they could have up in the wall. If you're constantly talking, they can't think of things for themselves. So remember that, because I tell you what, I've been on some viewings with some agents and they don't know I'm an agent, and it's unbearable. The amount that they talk and try and sell to me. No, I know I talk a lot. Hey, I could beat Rob Moore's record of 47 hours as a public speaker. I'm sure of it. But some of these people just waffle on and on and on and on and on. And sometimes I'm going out looking at investment properties and they put me off. And I have to try and see past all their waffle and bullshit to try and get to that point where I'm seeing things that I want to see and I'm concentrating on the things that I want to concentrate on. So shut up is I guess what I'm saying. However, you do also need to mention, and I use the word mention, is vital there. The word mention is vital there. Mention the key features of the property in each room. And I'll give you an example. You don't need to point out that this is a lounge or this is a kitchen. You could point out that the double glazed windows were installed 3 years ago. The boiler has been serviced every year. It's a 1-year-old boiler, right? The make of kitchen is X. The make of blah, 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 blah. You get what I'm saying? Mention a key feature. Do not point out the obvious. People know they've walked into a lounge. They can see it's a wallpapered wall or a plastered wall. They can see there's a feature fireplace. They can see that it's floorboarded. Hang on, wooden floors. Easy. So only speak when spoken to, but do mention the key features of the property. Lastly, give the tenants or the viewers some time to be alone, right? And here's a great tactic. You'll love this. If you are walking around, I'm just going to say a house. If you're walking around a house with a potential tenant and they walk into the kitchen and they particularly liked the kitchen, finish the viewing in that room and let them have a decision and have a talk amongst themselves in that room that they liked the most. And say, hey, look, do you know what? I'll go and wait by the front door, have a little talk amongst yourself, give us a shout when you're finished. And then go. Let them talk in the room they liked the most. Now, right, so we've done all these viewings, right? And the tenant says, hey, I want to take this place. I am very interested. Let's take it to the next stage. Do not charge any fees. Please don't charge any fees. You are not allowed to charge any tenant fees ever again. Well, until they change the legislation, which sucked. Anyway, you can't charge tenants for anything. However, you can take a holding deposit. Now, the holding deposit must be no more than 1 week's worth of rent. Now, there are a few things that you can do with the holding deposit, meaning there are some ways that you can keep it and some ways that you cannot. But I've done that in another video. I won't go into it now because it would just take up too much time. This one was all about basically creating your listing and getting the right tenants and advertising your property. So, but do not charge fees. Do take a holding deposit. Do not charge fees. Remember that. Fees for things like referencing and vetting and admin and processing. You cannot charge any tenant ever. So that is very important. And the last thing I want to say is that if you're going to do all of those things, right, all of those things that I've just mentioned, and there's a lot. And I said earlier on about how much are you worth per hour? How much do you get paid by your employer per hour, right? And there's a couple of bits to this. If you get paid, let's say £30 an hour or £40 an hour, you've got to spend all of the time creating the listing, taking photos, taking descriptions, taking floor plans, all of that sort of stuff. Building the listing, putting it all together, advertising it on all the properties, on all the property portals, taking all the inquiries, doing all the pre-vetting, speaking to every tenant, arranging the viewings, doing the viewings. Then you've got to spend all that time on that one tenant who wants to take the property and qualifies, doing the referencing. All right, you still outsource it, that's fine, but you've still got to check that over and you've still got to instruct it and you've still got to collect information from the tenant and do all of those things. Then you've got to do all the contracts. Then you've got to do all the compliance, the prescribed information. And if you don't do that, you will be in trouble. I've done a whole other thing on everything you need for every tenant every time. If you haven't got that, by the way, look, this is straight from a letting agent's mouth. So prescribed information, required information, compliance, legislation, and the legal stuff you must do, because now It's bad if you don't. The councils are after you, the government is after you, and if you don't do these things, you will be in serious trouble and big fines. In some cases, you'll be prosecuted. In some cases, it's prison. So please don't forget all that stuff. But it's hours. You've got to spend a lot of time doing this stuff right. How much are you paid per hour? If it's anything around the £400 mark to do all of that stuff based on your hourly rate, then use my bloody letting agent, will you? I'll tell you what, even if you want to do your own viewings, use my agent to build your listing and to advertise your property, to filter out all of the tenant inquiries into actual qualified tenants. Use my company. It's Pink Street. Now, the advertising only service that a letting agent should provide if they're keeping with the times, well, my letting advertise only service is national. Doesn't matter where you are in the country. Just contact me. It's tom@pinkstreet.co.uk. It will, well, first of all, we give you the guide on what photos to take, what to provide us, what information we need. Then we build the listing. Well, say we. My team will build the listing, and they build hundreds of listings. They know exactly what they're doing. They'll build the listing for you. They'll advertise it in the right places. They'll handle the inquiries and pass them to you, but they'll only pass you the proper inquiries of tenants that have been pre-apped and qualified to move into your property. No time wasters, no rubbish, no crap, no bad tenants. Right? And it's cheap as chips. So if you're going to spend anything more than a couple of hours on this, let my company do it, please. Anyway, or another company, or another letting agent. Sorry, I didn't mean to plug my company there. I'm just saying let Pink Street do it, or another reputable agent that can provide advertising only on a national scale. Because Rightmove is national, Zoopla is national, On the Market's national, Find a Property, Prime Location, Facebook, they're all national. So either let Pink Street do it for you, it's cheap as chips, or find a local letting agent if you feel like that's important and get it done yourself. Actually, do you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to tell you exactly what I do. So number one, yes, if you want an advertise only service, you just send us the photos and the details of your property, which we will do over the phone with you. We'll ask you the questions. You tell us the answers. We'll build the listing. Or if you want a full, that's anywhere in the UK, by the way. If you want a full tenant finding service or a let only service, then as long as you're in the PO postcode, which is Papa Oscar postcode, by the way, PO, then we can work with you. Pink Street can work with you. If you want full management, by the way, then again, yeah, we tend to stick to the PO postcode, but more than happy to work with any landlords that want full management. And there are a couple of different offers for full management, like we do an all-inclusive package, which is awesome. I don't know many other people that offer an all-inclusive package, which is great. And we also offer a guaranteed rent service, not rent guarantee. Rent guarantee is like an insurance product, but guaranteed rent is where you just get paid on the first of every month, regardless of whether the property's empty or whether it's the tenant's pay. It doesn't matter. You get your rent. That's it. Anyway, hopefully that wasn't too much of a plug. I don't mind. It's, you know what, like I say, it's a local business. I'm just trying to grow it, and this really helps me generate some awareness, and I don't sell very much. So if you want to work with me and my company, Pink Street, then please do. If you'd rather do it all yourself, then hey, I'm here to help you. I will not charge you for my help or training. Look, what I've done here is given you the beginnings. This is the start, getting the listing right, getting the right tenants interested in your property. There is a massive part, once you've found the right tenant, a huge part of what I call pre-tenancy, which is just all of the things you have to do with that tenant that wants to move into your property before they move into the property, and also on the moving day. There's a lot of legislation. Hey, we all want to be anonymous, right? Because what's the point in making money out of property if you've got no time or energy to enjoy it? My name's Tom Soane, and this is the Anonymous Landlord.